Welcome aboard, friends. UFC 308, Abu Dhabi, 10 o'clock a.m. start on the East Coast. Looking forward to a fantastic day filled with fights. No ladies' fights tomorrow. So 13 scraps. Should be a hell of a card. We've got a title fight at featherweight in the main event of the evening. Looking forward to that. Also looking forward to the greatest light heavyweight on planet Earth, Magomed Ankalaev, competing once again. He does have a tough matchup against Alexander Rakic. But let's get to breaking down all of these 13 fights. We'll start with the first fight of the night, where we have Rinat Fakhretdinov taking on Carlos Leal. By the way, did anyone catch how massive Leal looked in on the scales? Also, seasoned veteran, massive for the weight class. This is welterweights, and Fakhretdinov has a thin margin for error here. He's up against a fighter in Leal who can throw hands, has solid range management. I like what I see in regards to his ability to stay in the fight. And also, this kid is tough as nails, 30 years old, a lot of professional fights under his belt. Now, Fakhretdinov is going to have the crowd on his side, taking on a Brazilian fighter. Fakhretdinov, the grappling, the wrestling is the major advantage here. He's going to have to get this fight to the ground and try to drain Leal. You do not want to be trading with Carlos Leal on the feet. In this fight, you have Fakhretdinov coming in as the minus 223 betting favorite, and I am hesitant to touch that money line. I am not going to be touching that money line. I believe that Leal is in this fight. I won't outright pick Carlos Leal, but I will say that Fakhretdinov could potentially be playing with fire here, and he's got to proceed with caution, stick to his strengths. Mat return after mat return will be his path to victory. I do not want to see Fakhretdinov in the middle of the octagon trading hands. So give me Rinat Fakhretdinov to walk away victorious in a hotly contested matchup. Now, second bout of the night, where we have Ismail Nurdiev taking on Bruno Silva. This isn't the Bruno Silva that we've seen at bantamweight. We're talking about the middleweight Bruno Silva. I saw Bruno Silva take a loss a few months ago in Atlantic City at Boardwalk Hall against none other than Chris Weidman. And Bruno Silva, the eye pokes were there, right? But he looked horrific. And we know that Bruno Silva was gifted a black belt after his win over Andrew Sanchez. I like to say goodness gracious early and often, and I'll say it again here. Goodness gracious, what's happening here? Ismail Nurdiev has the Austrian Wonder Boy namesake. What does he bring to the table here? He's got some movement. He's got some striking ability. He gets in and gets out. Yes, we saw Sean Brady mop the floor with him, but in this spot, Nurdiev, the much more spry fighter, I believe that Bruno Silva here could potentially be on his last legs as a professional mixed martial artist. Many knockouts to his name, and Silva's going to have to put Nurdiev's lights out here. I can't bank on that happening, and I'm going to be siding with Ismail Nurdiev to walk away victorious in this matchup. And there is a potential for a finish late in this fight. I don't trust Silva the longer the fight goes, especially if we get deep into the second and third rounds here. Bruno Silva is going to have to go out on his shield, because I believe gas tanks are going to be emptied in this spot. So give me Ismail Nurdiev. By the way, we have a number of comments here in the comment section. I want to acknowledge those. Donnie, thank you for joining the stream today. Christopher, 11 more hours. You are correct. We are bringing some electricity to the night. We will be breaking into the morning. The dawn will soon be upon us. For those who are catching this breakdown live, I thank you for tuning in. I hope you have a fresh cup of coffee with you as we break this down. Let's go. Let's see. Let's get to the next. You're right. Silva is chinny. Let's get to the next matchup where we have Farid Basharat taking on Victor Hugo. Victor Hugo was not impressed with his last fight in the UFC at the Apex. He's taking on a Basharat brother here who seems to have come to his senses in regards to his lifestyle and training, opening new doors, new chapters of his life here. And Basharat, one thing I do like about him is his fight IQ. He will fight to his strengths. He is risk averse, so he isn't going to go put himself into the fire where he could potentially get knocked out. He has a significant advantage here in many respects. And you look at the line here, the betting line is extremely wide. Farid Basharat sitting at -725, and you've got Victor Hugo plus 525 at the betting window. Oh, I am inclined to seek out Farid Basharat via decision. He's not necessarily a finisher by trade, and Hugo is a tough out himself. So I'm going to be picking Farid Basharat to walk away victorious in that matchup. And you know that the crowd is going to be behind Basharat in that matchup. Now, this is a fight that has me scratching my head. Kennedy Nzechukwu taking on Chris Barnett. Why is the UFC making this fight? Why is Chris Barnett still competing inside of the octagon? Nzechukwu, fight IQ, dangerously low. The Team Fortis corner is usually screaming and screaming and screaming, demanding that Nzechukwu stick to the game plan. And he has trouble. He has a history of trouble sticking to the game plan, Nzechukwu. And he's got the length. He's got so many different size advantages here from the kicking game, the cardio, the length, the reach. Barnett's going to have to land something and catch Nzechukwu off guard to win this fight. Roly-poly, Chris Barnett carrying about 90 additional pounds, walking around. Imagine carrying all that extra weight every day, all day long. It's got to weigh on Chris Barnett, and he carries all of that extra weight into the octagon. Yes, he's able to throw some spinning attacks and show some flashiness, but this is a fighter who was getting his ass beat by Jake Collier, and he's been brutalized in the past, but he's tough. He's tough. I'll give Barnett that. In this fight, I'm going to be picking Kennedy Nzechukwu to walk away victorious. And I think that he gets this done inside the distance. There's a very high likelihood of that happening. But is it going to be a submission or is it going to be a knockout? Nzechukwu, I could see him landing a knee as Barnett is attempting to close distance in one of his roly-poly maneuvers. That is not going to be fundamentally sound when he's out there. He may end up chugging an adult beverage on the way outside of the octagon, as we've seen happen many times before. Give me Nzechukwu inside the distance there. We've got a number of comments here. Let's see. Kennedy should not be -800 over anyone. I agree with you there. The longer the fight goes, it favors Barnett. Kennedy can fade, but I would bet him too. However, I'm staying away from this fight. Yeah, smart move, I believe, Josh. Smart move, staying away. Now, let's talk Bruno Ferreira taking on Abus Magomedov. Now, Bruno Ferreira, I believe he has a knockout victory over RoboCop where he caught him, and he can catch anybody. The Hulk is a marauder, someone who's going to go out on his shield. I like seeing that. Fighters who are willing to take risks inside of the octagon to accomplish their goals. So many times in the past, we see fighters who are content walking away with the loss, knowing that they went the entire 15 minutes. But this is not one of those guys. And Abus Magomedov, he's been humiliated on the big stage before against Sean Strickland and others, has a bit of a gas tank issue, will come out hot. Striking is there. And in this spot, if he's able to, there's a huge size advantage for Abus Magomedov here. On the range, striking is going to be heavily in favor of Abus Magomedov. Bruno Ferreira is going to have to catch Abus Magomedov on an exchange where he overextends, and that is Ferreira's path to victory. Other than that, I don't see Ferreira having much of a shot here against Magomedov, and as a minus 150 betting favorite, I think this is a solid line. Also, you have the Brazilian fighter taking on a Magomedov in Abu Dhabi. I believe that the crowd will be heavily favoring Magomedov here, and I think we are in a bit of a solid spot here, but Ferreira can put anybody's lights out. We've seen him do it before. Give me Abus Magomedov in that matchup. Now, this is a great fight. Miktik Oralby taking on Mateusz Rebecki, and Rebecki coming in as the plus 265 underdog. You want to talk recency bias? This is a case where we do have some serious recency bias. Carlos Diego Ferreira, CDF, ragdolled Rebecki late in their fight, and that was a situation where Rebecki was completely exhausted and had nothing left, burnt himself out going for the finish, and he was and is a very highly skilled fighter, a Polish fighter who is a nail. He's muscle bound, and he can get this fight to the mat, and he's very aggressive. The challenge here, Oralby is only 26 years of age, so he's still developing. I believe he fights at a Team Alpha Male, and he is a fighter who is very well-rounded, and he just seems to do everything right and doesn't take huge shots, has a solid gas tank, and I like Oralby in this matchup. I don't like the price, though. Minus 315 at the betting window. I've seen Oralby win via decision in the past, and I think that that's the path to victory here for Oralby. I think that he could outlast Rebecki again. Rebecki's going to come out hot, and you may get a great number on Oralby midway through the first round when Rebecki's having some early success. Give me Oralby to win via decision in that matchup. Wow, look at the comments. We've got a bunch of oh yes, it's a disrespectful line, Shady, and I agree. You talk recency bias, that's what we're seeing right here. Let's see. He should have won, but he burnt himself out. You are correct. We saw the same thing. 150 to 185. Yes, I agree. Jake, thank you. Thank you. Yes, look for a live number there, Shady, if you have a book that offers that. And keep those trigger fingers there ready for action. Now, let's talk Jeff Neal versus RDA, Rafael dos Anjos. This is a fight that 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, RDA, I believe, would be a heavy, heavy favorite. And you saw the wheels have fallen off on Rafael dos Anjos, and he is still tough as nails, still marches forward, and will bring the fight to anybody. You see that look in his eyes. Man, I wish the McGregor fight happened many years ago. Imagine the world if that fight took place. RDA, I believe, could have walked away victorious against Conor McGregor on that fateful evening, but we'll never know. Jeff Neal coming in as the minus 281 favorite. We talked about Kennedy Zechukwu, Team Fortis fighter, and now Team Fortis fighter and Jeff Neal competing under the bright lights in Abu Dhabi here. I am leaning towards the underdog in this spot. If this fight is fought within the pocket in close range, if there's clinching involved, then this fight favors RDA. I know he's typically a lightweight, and he's taking on a Jeff Neal, who's a much taller fighter. Also, one thing I have to say, if RDA does get sparked here, I believe it's a head kick loss, a head kick knockout loss. Remember that Frank Camacho fight? Oh my God, that was a highlight reel for Jeff Neal. And here, if Jeff Neal is unable to maintain range and RDA is constantly closing the distance and staying on Jeff Neal, then I believe Jeff Neal could be in a world of trouble here. I think this is a bit disrespectful to RDA, and I will outright pick Rafael dos Anjos in this spot. But I got to be honest with myself too, that RDA has so many fights under his belt, and the mileage is it's accruing. There isn't much tread life left on RDA, and we could see the last of RDA here. By the way, if there is a violent knockout, I believe that there are a few fights on this card that have the potential for serious fight-ending, horrific knockouts, and RDA is potential for one to get sparked, and we'll talk about one later in the card where we haven't necessarily seen that fighter knocked out yet. So you might catch my drift, know where I'm going here, but we'll see. But give me RDA to walk away victorious. Now, this is another fighter who I saw compete at Boardwalk Hall in Atlantic City, Ibo Aslan, a very aggressive Turkish fighter who wings, punches. The striking defense is not on display. Extreme aggression. And he's taking on Rafael Cerqueira, who is sitting at minus 125. Cerqueira is the taller fighter, the larger fighter here, and he seemed a bit more cerebral, at least during the weigh-ins. Aslan, wide-eyed, getting in the face, shaking his head, and he fights that way too. I trust that Aslan is going to be very reckless out there, and that's why I see him as being the underdog in this spot. And I think that aggressiveness is going to come back to haunt him in this spot, and he's going to get countered by Cerqueira in this matchup. So give me the Brazilian fighter to walk away victorious in that spot. Let's see. We've got some additional comments here. Nicholas, thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you being here on this festive fight night as we turn the clock and we get ready for that beautiful fight morning as the sun rises and we buckle in. By the way, what meals are you all preparing for tomorrow's fight day to commemorate UFC 308 in Abu Dhabi? I ask of you, let's talk controversial judging. Let's talk some potential home cooking. And I know Magomedov isn't necessarily from Abu Dhabi, but he is the heavily backed fighter in that neck of the woods. And we saw it at the weigh-ins that Shara Bullet Magomedov was treated like a king when he was brought on stage. And Armen Petrosian is a striker by trade. He's going to have to grapple here, though, to have success. And I believe it will be a competitive striking affair. You have to always wonder, every time I see Shara Bullet Magomedov, I realize that he does basically have one eye. The other eye is very clouded up and has very poor vision. So we need to take that into account as far as depth perception. He's looked great in recent UFC fights, but here I think this is one of those fights that we'll see a very closely lined fight live. I think that when it heads to the scorecards, will likely, I'm gonna say that I believe we'll likely see Petrosian appear to be the victor, and I think we're in for a split decision victory for Magomedov. I would want to be holding the Petrosian ticket, knowing that there's value in it, but Magomedov, I would say maybe 30 cents to 50 cents on this line is dedicated to home cooking being baked into it. And that's a real thing when you head to different parts of the globe. I know that some of the judges, they travel all around, but they're human too, and they're affected by the sound and the crowd, and you shouldn't be, but it is a implicit bias that we see happening during these fights. So it pains me to say this, to pick Magomedov, even though I believe that Petrosian will look like the winner. So I've done a lot of homework on this fight. I was contemplating pulling the trigger on Petrosian. I just believe that this is one of those fights where Magomedov's going to get some love from the crowd and the judges. Wow, a lot of folks in the comments section here. Let's see. Like Saturday morning cartoons back in the day, Mike. Yes, sir. Let's see. Patrick, do you prefer afternoon pay-per-views or I've got two kids who are growing up, and they've got a lot of things going on, so it allows me time to get to their events, so that the evenings, the classic pay-per-views are what I prefer. But I do realize that for different folks, different strokes, right? Good question. Thank you, sir. So the pick is going to be Magomedov. Hesitantly, though, I believe I dug a little too much into that breakdown. We're already at 21 minutes. So we've got a bunch of more fights to continue to break down here. Let's continue our journey. Lerone Murphy taking on Dan Ige. By the way, when you watch the weigh-ins, both the official weigh-ins and the ceremonial weigh-ins, Lerone Murphy looked like he cut a significant amount of weight. And then as he hopped on the scale for ceremonial weigh-ins, he was in a full sweat. Don't typically see that unless maybe he was shadow boxing in the back before coming out. Dan Ige, tough as nails, plus 210 underdog. One thing I wanted to look at this fight that struck me. I'm pulling up fight odds right now, and the over under in this fight ends inside the distance, plus 240. I'm seeing on the board right now. That is odd. Both of these fighters, they throw with bad intentions, and if this fight ends up fireworks in the center of the octagon, it would not surprise me to see somebody get put out. I know how tough Ige is, but he also has a jiu-jitsu background and can lock something up. And Lerone Murphy, I don't necessarily trust his ability to take fights to the mat. I don't trust. I mean, we remember what Makwan Amirkhani looked like. He was having some significant success against Lerone Murphy until they started trading. And man, in this fight, I feel like this line is way too wide. I know Ige puts himself behind the eight ball, being an undersized fighter, and also he doesn't throw for volume. He also can get his back taken at times, and Murphy has a significant size advantage here, and I believe that Murphy is going to put on some weight too after these weigh-ins. He looked like he cut so much weight. I'm going to be picking Dan Ige here. He's just when he plants his feet and torques his body into these punches, he's got so much behind it, and I think that he's going to hurt Murphy in this spot. It would not shock me to see Ige knock Murphy out here, and I think that fight doesn't go the distance line is way off, plus 240. Wow. I mean, I think that's worth a bit of a maybe a half unit play. We'll see. But give me Dan Ige in that matchup. Now let's talk the greatest light heavyweight in the game, possibly the greatest light heavyweight of all time, but he hasn't had the belt yet. The uncrowned champion of the weight class, Magomed Ankalaev, and he's taking on an Alexander Rakic. They are making this so tough on Ankalaev to reach the belt. Rakic is one of the best fighters at light heavyweight. It just happens that the last time out, he was caught by Yuri, who drew Rakic into a firefight. And Rakic was winning that fight, looked great. Rakic looks great against most light heavyweights. Solid fighter in his own right. And no one said it was going to be easy for Ankalaev. Granted, the Jan Blachowicz fight, you heard Jan say, give him the belt. Give him the belt, Joe. And Ankalaev, he would beat Jamal Hill, I believe, like that. Ankalaev, in my eyes, would beat Alex Pereira. And he could do it in a multitude of ways. Take that fight to the ground and have significant success there. Also, solid striker. The one thing about Ankalaev, he's very hesitant, and he seems as if he's aware of his surroundings to a point where it's to his own detriment. The Thiago Santos fight is something that I'm talking about right now. That is a fight that comes back to haunt me because he put himself in a precarious situation and got caught and then fought. I don't want to say fought scared, but he didn't take many chances in that fight. And then the later the fight went, you saw him become more comfortable and walk away victorious. He's got to come out, be aggressive here, take the center of the octagon, be aware of the leg kicks of Rakic. Rakic loves to throw those leg kicks, and man, this should be a good one. This should be a good one. I believe that Ankalaev will likely win this fight via decision, but it could be close. And we've seen in many fights, Ankalaev seems to just do enough to skate by and doesn't put a stamp on some of these fights. And sometimes that's a sign of a great fighter too. You don't necessarily have to walk away with a finish. Think of John Fitch. Think of George St. Pierre, fighters who they fought to win. They didn't fight necessarily to get the fans to roar and chant their name. So in my eyes, Ankalaev, best fighter in the weight class. If he fought John Jones today or last year or 3 years or 5 years ago, I believe Ankalaev mops the floor with John Jones. And I don't think that's a stretch, folks. Rakic is a very dangerous fighter, very highly skilled. And this is not a cupcake matchup for Ankalaev. I believe that the Pereira fight is a much easier fight than this fight versus Rakic. The Johnny Walker fight is a dangerous fight because you're taking on a fighter who could put your lights out like that. To fight Iwan Cutelaba four or five separate times they were matched up with one another. That held Ankalaev up for an entire year. That's incredible. By the way, if you wouldn't mind subscribing to the channel right now and liking the video if you enjoy my content. I've been at around 800 subscribers for quite some time now. This is 6 consecutive winning tracked betting years. This year we're looking to turn the corner and work our way through the rest of the segment here. I want to thank you for taking time out of your Saturday evening to be here with me. So the pick is going to be Magomed Ankalaev, and I believe that he gets this done via decision. Now, let's talk Khamzat Chimaev taking on Robert Whittaker. Robert Whittaker, I will say, if there's a fighter who will fight hard for your money, Robert Whittaker is that guy. He will go out on his sword. He will take chances. He will come in knowing that it's a 25-minute fight. The Romero fights, the Yoel Romero fights, I like you to take a few minutes and watch back both of those performances. Granted, they may have taken a few years off of his life, but also we saw what Robert Whittaker's capable of. The Gastelum fight. We've seen many others where Robert Whittaker, he can put on a show. He can fight well at range. He's got great takedown defense, does have some wrestling here, but he is up against a juggernaut in Khamzat Chimaev, who comes out like a ball on fire early, will likely look to get his hands clasped around Robert Whittaker, but that is easier said than done. First, Khamzat Chimaev is going to have to track down Whittaker, and I believe that the way he does that is he's going to set up his takedowns with with punches, and he's going to try to corral Whitaker near the cage and then take Whitaker to the mat and lock up a submission in this spot. I think that this fight is Chimaev inside the distance. I believe that is the solid play here. But if this ends up going 5 rounds, I have real concerns for Chimaev in this spot. Whitaker's a great fighter, great champion, will fight incredibly hard for your money. And Chimaev, we haven't seen that out of him. He will ignore his corner. He will go balls to the wall and burn himself out early in fights. The Usman fight, that got dangerous. Granted, the first part of that fight, Chimaev was manhandling and ragdolling Kamaru Usman up at 185 pounds. I know that was short notice, but just goes to show you how dangerous Chimaev is. And he, we have to mention, was the last fighter to the scale and put in a ton of work making weight. In this spot, I'm picking Chimaev to win inside the distance, but I am not counting out Robert Whitaker. Would make my day to see Whitaker walk away victorious because I enjoy what he stands for. He's a family guy who wears his heart on his sleeve, and he talks honestly about what he's experienced in the fight game. This guy's had some really horrible injuries throughout his career, and he's a fighter's fighter. The other thing is Chimaev. He's going to have the crowd behind him here. And, man, I believe that's going to propel him to victory in this spot. And I think that Chimaev is going to lock up a submission in this fight. Now, main event of the evening. But before we get to the main event, let's take a look at the additional comments here. Oh, my goodness. Yes, my boy Ankalaev. Yuri Prohashka put the pressure on Rakic. And I suspect that, well, I know that Ankalaev is capable of doing that. Whitaker's resume is incredible. Montel Jackson. Yes, I'm a big fan of Montel Jackson and what he brings to the table. Thank you. I appreciate it, Mr. Fresh. Let's talk main event of the evening. Ilya Topuria, Max Holloway. And this I've mentioned many times in the lead up to this fight. This fight is going to answer a lot of questions. We've heard both fighters talk the talk, and to some extent, they've walked the walk because now Topuria is the champion, and Max has worked his way back into this title fight. But really, did he? He beat Justin Gaethje in dramatic fashion and basically propelled himself into this spot without taking on Volkanovski again. Volkanovski, we know, there were 3 consecutive losses, granted some controversial losses to Volkanovski. The range, the distance management of Holloway is going to be a big factor for him here. And he's going to have to avoid getting caught in the pocket during these exchanges. I've pointed this out many times. The most amount of head strikes absorbed in the UFC. This was years ago that Holloway was up there. Granted, he has been in so many 5-round fights. He's accrued so much damage, but nobody's really put Holloway out. I was insinuating earlier in my breakdown that this has the potential for a horrific knockout, and we saw what happened to Volkanovski. I have real concerns that this may happen to Holloway here. We know Arnold Allen was throwing heat early in his fight, trying to put Holloway out of there. Couldn't do it, and Holloway found his footing, found the range, and if these two guys, we heard about it, that they potentially may point their finger to the mat within the first few seconds and start trading. Who is that going to favor? Obviously, that favors Topuria big time. The other elephant in the room here that's not being talked about is there's a significant grappling discrepancy here, and Ilya Topuria has a massive edge in the ground game. I see the potential for Topuria winning via submission. Look at how wide that number is, and how much value there is on that play. But how does he get that fight to the mat? Is he going to follow Holloway to the ground, or is he going to wave him back to his feet to prove a point? So I think you could potentially be playing with fire if you have a submission play on Topuria. The other thing I need to mention here is the gas tank of Topuria. We've seen the fight against Josh Emmett. He went all 5 rounds and he looked phenomenal in that fight. He was toying with Josh Emmett, and Josh Emmett's not known for throwing volume. Max Holloway is. So if Holloway is to win this fight, it is to stay on his bike, keep the range, and out volume Topuria. But that is easier said than done. He's going to be eating some hellacious body shots. The leg kicks of Topuria, we've seen him in recent fights implement that. That is a potential game changer. Max Holloway, we've seen against Gaethje. Gaethje, we thought that he was going to chew up the lead leg of Holloway and take his leg out and win in that fashion by completely destroying Holloway. But Holloway, he is tough as nails, and he has so much pride. And I'll say this too. I believe that Max Holloway, he's a great champion, and the longer the fight goes, he figures his opponents out, and he will pour it on late. The Aldo fights, incredible how he is able to learn on the fly, and that's what great fighters do. Sometimes even Petr Yan takes a few rounds off to gauge and learn. We've seen it with Floyd Mayweather and others. But how much mileage is there on Max Holloway's odometer? And that fight against Justin Gaethje was up at 155 pounds. Now, all of a sudden, he loses all that muscle mass and he's back down at 145 pounds. What does that mean for Max Holloway there? Topuria, young champion, all the confidence in the world, especially the way when he bobs his head while he talks, you can see the self-belief. I personally, I have a tough time with folks who have that much self-belief because there are delusions of grandeur there, and they don't know where their limit is. Sometimes they think there is no limit, and I'm a glass half full kind of guy, but I'm also a realist. And that to me is dangerous, because if Topuria puts himself in a space where he's in uncharted waters, and let's say he empties the tank or empties his clip, what's he going to do when he has his gas tank is running on empty, and here's Max Holloway standing right in front of him, starting to pour it on him? That's a dangerous situation. So if Topuria gets this done, I believe he gets it done inside the distance. And the challenge here is Holloway hasn't been put away, right? But there's the potential for a submission here for Topuria. There's a potential for a knockout shot by Topuria. The thing is, he's going to have to close distance here. We even though Holloway doesn't have very long arms, he does use his range well, and he's able to pull his head back and make opponents miss, and then land 2-3 straight punches. So I'm really excited for this main event. I'm going to be picking Topuria. I think this line is going to close a little bit as we get closer to the main event. Fight of the night for you, Shady. Patrick says, most excited you've been for a fight all year. Tomorrow is going to be glorious. I agree. Josh says, I would argue Poirier hits harder than Topuria. And Max took shots from him, yes, up at 155 pounds. Topuria struggled against Herbert. Jai Herbert till he put him to sleep. It's tough. It's a tough fight to pick. Topuria has been very good. This is where I believe the delusions of grandeur are going to help Topuria. He hasn't been humbled. And until you get humbled, you think you can do anything. And that's that's a situation where I'm going to be picking Topuria to win and to get it done inside the distance. The other thing is the fight game isn't fair. It's a cruel, raw sport where sometimes the good guys don't win. And although I believe in Max Holloway and he is a great guy, great human being for the sport, I think that it's Topuria's time to shine. We're at 40 minutes, folks. I want to take the time to thank everybody for tuning in. Remember to go get what's yours, and let's get some subscribers here. I really appreciate having a tight knit community that I interact with on a regular basis. I know we have well over 10,000 followers on Twitter, but a lot of my work is done and has been done for the better part of a decade, creating videos and breaking down fights. So that's where we make our hay. So cheers to you and thank you, everybody. So have a great rest of your day. Go get what's yours.